What's up, people? This episode is sponsored by Lucia Rivas-Herry, nutritionist, chemical engineer, and director of Nutrition is Medicine, a nutrition online business specializing in microbiome and nutrigenomic testing, consulting, nutrition plans, and the NIM Learning Hub membership. Lucia believes gut health and the interaction of key genes is fundamental to the root cause of health issues and resolving those issues. Lucia is offering all Primodcast subscribers and listeners 10% off all microbiome and gene testing packages. Get on it, people. Simply add Primod at checkout and the discount will apply. I'll attach a link in the description of this podcast. Now, on today's episode, the podcast is back. It's been a while. I took a month off, but it's good to be back now. My guest, Lucia. So Lucia is a good friend of mine. She's been on the show before. For those of you who don't know, Lucia is a chemical and biomedical engineer and nutritionist and director of Nutrition is Medicine, a nutrition online business specializing in microbiome and nutrigenomic DNA testing, consulting, and nutrition plans based all on gut and gene findings. Lucia also has an online membership called NIM Learning Hub, which, by the way, is extremely informative. It focuses on health topics, deep dives into topics such as glyphosate, mold, fertility, and is developing a gene and microbiome wellness transformation pathway for those who are keen to understand and apply the fundamentals of gut health, genetics, and the environment into their lives. She's also a mum of two, Brisbane-based, and as I said, good friend of mine. She's been on the show, so I hope you guys enjoy it.
Ladies and gentlemen, podcasting from Sydney, Australia. This is the Primodcast. Independent, unfiltered, and uncensored. Beginning in 3, 2, 1.
When we do it, but I'll forget otherwise. It's very hard. Like when I feel like sometimes I've only got a certain amount of capacity mentally, and it's like I need to erase some things to learn more. My brain is so full. I'm like, I really want to learn about this, but I'm still, learning about this, and I just can't. I'm at the point now. I'm like, I need to somehow defragment my brain and just free up some space.
I'm exactly the same, Chris. I'm exactly the same. Where I spent about a month deep diving into gut issues like IBS and Sibo through a really good naturopath who does a very, very in-depth practitioner course on it. And that was hours and hours. And then I started doing the mastermind with MTHFR Australia into, methylation pathways and genetics and all this stuff. And now I feel like my brain's going to explode trying to remember everything.
It's so much. You know what? There's so much. I found the more, because look, I've never been big on like fad diets. Like I've tried them. In particular, I really tried a plant-based diet a few years ago, more so just to get a few things under control. Like I had high blood pressure at the time, so I wanted to get that under control. And I heard that by eliminating red meat, meat in general, it reduces your blood pressure, which it did. I did it for a few months, and it really did help the blood pressure. I lost a lot of weight, but I lost a lot of body fat, but I also lost a lot of muscle mass. To the end where I sort of didn't look healthy. Like I didn't look good. Even my wife was saying, "Oh, you need to put a bit of weight back on." So, and I lost a lot of strength. I just didn't feel good. So, I have tried plant-based diets. I've tried keto. Keto was extremely difficult. I was much younger though when I tried that, so I'd probably do better now that I'm a bit more disciplined. But I'm very interested in nutrition, but there's so many contradictions in that space.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is, and I think that it's actually overwhelming because I was talking to a friend the other day, and because I've deep dived, as I was telling you, into perimenopause and menopause, and a lot of women really don't understand any of that space. They just think that when they turn 50, they'll just stop getting a period and that's the end of it, basically. But it's not. It's a whole journey from your 40s onwards, and it can take 10 years to go through all that. And
there's a lot of moving parts.
Yes, there is. And in that time, you have to change your lifestyle habits and you have to change your eating habits. And one of the biggest strategies to combat all the perimenopause symptoms like those, hot flashes and all those, anxiety, all these things go crazy is intermittent fasting. and I follow a really good doctor from the US, Dr. Mindy Peltz, who teaches that for women in perimenopause and menopause. And she explains it so well that I have really taken that and coached my people in my membership through that, because it's incredibly helpful and so important for people to understand that process. And that because, as you know, a lot of we're now having kids later in life. And so
Yes.
you're seeing a lot of people have kids late 30s, early 40s. And biologically speaking, we probably shouldn't be doing that, because in actual fact, women start having perimenopause then. And the problem is you're then accelerating your stress in your life rather than decelerating stress, because you're supposed to transition out of a really busy, hectic lifestyle with the kids and raising little ones and running around after little ones and all this stuff, to really slowing down and simplifying your life. At a certain age, after your 40s, you should be really ramping down, not ramping up, because your hormones will change all on their own, and they don't function well if you're in a really stressed state.
I couldn't imagine starting, having children at, in your 30s. Like I've got 5 and
I
have 5 kids, right? But I'm 29 and I have my son who's 13 in a few months. Obviously I was very young. I was like 16 when he was born. So,
oh yeah, you did have a really early.
Yeah. So it's been good. Like I've had a great time with him, and I'm young enough and fit enough to run around with him and have fun, and like we like similar things, similar sports, similar movies, and it's good now. But I couldn't. But now I had my daughter now. I think she's 8 or 9 months. 8 months, and it's a bit different now than what it was when I had the kids when I was a bit younger, right? Like I'm so much busier now than I was as well. So I've got to find a lot more time, but in saying that, obviously being terminated from my job back in August last year, and working primarily from home since then, I've got a great bond with her. I haven't, we're really close, and she's daddy's girl. Whereas the other kids I was working, like, typical 40 plus hours a week, and I was never at home. So I don't have the same connection with them that I do with my youngest now. So that's a great thing. But I couldn't imagine starting, like if this was my first child, I couldn't imagine having 5 now. Like there's no way.
Yeah,
No
exactly.
way.
I mean, because I can imagine when you were 16 or 17 and had your first child, it was probably overwhelming, because you were a teenager. You were still a kid, you were still growing yourself, but you probably didn't feel the level of tiredness that you do now with the kids,
Well, you know what's funny? It's quite funny. So I feel better today than I did when I was 21. I feel fantastic. I have a lot more energy today than I did back then, mainly because of my diet and just not just diet, but even my habits. Like I don't eat as much shit as I did when I was younger, and I prioritize my own mental and physical health. It's something that's right on top of my priority list. Whereas when you're 21, who gives a fuck, right? You just do what you want. You go out drinking all weekend, and I couldn't do it now. I wouldn't wake up. I'd be in a coma if I was to behave the way I did when I was 18, 19.
But that's the thing, like your own maturity and even just lifespan forces you to slow down, because you don't recover the same. That there's no way you could force yourself to do that. Like I had my first child when I was 31, and I went into it really healthy and fit, because I was competing in bodybuilding comps and I was dieting through like paleo diets. I was really clean with my whole lifestyle. So I recovered really fast, and I didn't feel really that tired or anything. I felt fine. Then at 35, I had my second child, and I wasn't exercising anywhere near as much anymore. I had gone back to uni, I was working, and I had a 3-year-old. And it was like 10 times harder to go through the pregnancy, to recover from it. And even now I'm 3 years postpartum, which sounds like a long time, but I'm still recovering from it. It's just way, I'll be 38 this year, and I'm finding it way harder to find the energy to keep up with the kids. And my husband's the same. And often we're just like, oh my God, these kids are just nonstop. They need to be outside playing all day long. But our battery's gone by the end of the afternoon, so it's kind of that,
How old's your husband?
He's the same age as me.
Okay. Yeah. It's, I think it is that you do slow down as you get a little bit older. And I think a lot of it as well is you're aware of your own mortality, right? I mean, when you're younger, you don't even think about dying, or you don't think about consequences of actions. You just do it. You just do whatever you want to do. And as you get a little bit older, you realize, shit, maybe, if I do this, I can do it, but then I'll feel like shit for 2 days afterwards. And you realize that you're definitely not invincible.
Yeah.
And that sort of what happened for me sort of in my mid-20s. I started being more conscious about things that I wouldn't have really thought about.
Yeah.
And when I was a bit younger.
Same.
So it's a weird transition, 20 to 30, because it's not a great deal of time. It's 10 years, but I think it's just that time period of that age where you really change, the way you think changes.
Well, exactly, because apparently you don't fully mature in your brain until about 25. So
is that for men and women? I've heard that men mature later on.
Men do, yeah. It's probably more so for men than women, but we don't make good. And it's a brain development thing. We don't tend to make good decisions until closer to age 25, because we just haven't developed to that point yet. And I think some people develop slower than others. I don't think we're all at the same pace.
No,
I think I think some people are different. It depends and it really depends what your childhood experience was, what your childhood health was like, what your teenage years were like, and how healthy you were in those teenage years. I think that does impact a lot what happens in your 20s after that too.
Look, I've said this for many years. For me, 18 is too young. Like 18 is too young to buy alcohol, buy cigarettes. It's too young to vote. I don't think any 18-year-old should be voting. I think.
Yeah, I agree.
When I was 18, I didn't care. Like I was just going there and choosing the party, whatever party it was that had the best sounding name. I was like, yep, that's what I want. And you give no thought to it. You just do it. And it's, the same with alcohol and cigarettes. So I don't believe an 18-year-old. And this was when I was working in nightclubs, I used to see the difference in, the amount of bullshit and drama and that used to go on with people. They were typically the younger ones, 18, 19. Look, you still had trouble with the older ones, but primarily it's like the really young ones, 18, 19. And that's just a maturity thing. And as they get a little bit older, they're more reasonable. They don't carry on as much. They don't get into fights as much. Look, I think America's got it with the 21 there to buy alcohol. And I think that's quite reasonable.
I think so too. I think that's a much better age to be able to buy alcohol and cigarettes and vote.
And then
I think that's a much smarter age.
Brain. It is, but also the development of the brain. Like an 18-year-old's brain, it's not fully developed, surely.
No, it's not.
So again, damage to a developing brain by drinking on the weekends, and it's not good.
No, I agree. I totally agree, especially when you're having alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people, the damage that people do to themselves in their teenage years really comes back to hit them in their 20s and in their 30s. And I do talk to a lot of people who are fixing adolescent, poor eating habits and poor behavior well into their 20s and 30s. So, but because we don't have the maturity to understand that, I think that you think you're invincible because you just tend to recover fast. You don't have hangovers, so therefore it's fine. You can keep doing that, But it does come and bite you in the ass later, I find.
It does. You know what? So we went out. My wife and the kids, we all went out last weekend just for dinner, and I think she had one drink. I had like one beer and a few sips of a Canadian Club, and I don't drink ever. I don't drink. So later that night, we only had one. Like I had 1.5, she had one, and later that night we're like, well, I don't feel good. Like I don't feel good. I don't feel great. I feel sluggish. I just don't feel good. And she said, yeah, I'm the same. I don't know how people go on benders. Like I couldn't do it. Honestly, I was feeling it. Even the next morning, she found it harder to get up in the morning. She took longer to wake up. She wasn't as clear headed. It's incredible because when you're 18, 19, you drink, till you pass out, you wake up in the morning feeling brand new. It's
that's right. But really, that's I mean, it's normal, I suppose, to some extent for we don't turn over cells as fast anymore. We don't make energy and ATP in our mitochondria as well anymore. Like those things do slow down, and especially someone's genetics are quite, I guess, problematic or impaired, where they tend to have inflammatory genes and they tend to have detoxification issues. Those genes may not trigger in their adolescence, but if they expose themselves to that much toxin, those genes turn on because they tend to in some people, and boom, you've got the inflammation and all these problems that then come up in your 20s or 30s. So it's an interesting area because I see a lot of people who have had, chronic fatigue for a long time, or they say to me, I've had gut issues for 10 years, or anxiety for a long time. And I look at their genetic reports, and sure enough, they've got all impaired genes for inflammatory markers. So they tend to be chronically inflamed genetically. And then some detox pathways don't work very well, like glutathione. They don't make glutathione very well, or they're missing that gene altogether. All these things, right, come together to make the perfect storm of someone who pushed it too hard, too fast, and then has all these problems later.
It's very interesting. And only yesterday we had a phone conversation, and I was talking to you about how with the change of my diet and lifestyle in the past few months, that things like my knees feel fantastic, which I have no doubt was due to inflammation. What I was dealing with was definitely inflammation, and now that seems to have cleared up. It's just incredible, like the way, because I was having, at times, like when it was really bad, I was having anti-inflammatories, but you shouldn't be having them. They're not the best things for you. But it got really bad. But it's incredible just what a change, an overall change to your body, the way you feel. And it's been something that I'm still learning about what my body likes and doesn't like. I mean, that's what I was talking to you before about diets, that, all these diets, I mean, we're all different. All of us are different. Like someone might go keto and feel fantastic and have no issues and be sweet. And other people will struggle with certain things. Same with meat. Some people that have meat, they have high inflammation, and they go vegan or plant-based and they're fine. And sometimes it's in reverse. So there's no sort of one size fits all to diet. And that's why I'm always
that's right.
trialing different things and seeing how I feel. And look, we're the best judge of ourselves, like how we feel. If we eat a certain way for a few months and, we feel good, then stick to it, obviously. But just, blindly following someone, there's many people I follow online. I mean, Carnivore MD, Paul, I don't know his last name, starts with S, Paul, Dr. Sean Baker, the Carnivore MD, one that originally wrote the Carnivore Diet book.
Do you follow Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Stephen Lin at all?
No. Their names sound very familiar.
Yeah, Mark Hyman is quite famous in the US for he's developed what's called I think he's called it a pescatarian sort of diet. But he basically a Pagan diet, he calls it. That's right, or Pagan. Pagan diet. So he wrote a book about it, actually. It's where he says eat foods low in sugar and starch, eat lots of plant foods. And if you're going to eat animal foods, eat sustainably grown or harvested foods, and have foods that have lots of good fats like nuts and seeds, olive oil, and avocados. So I feel that's kind of the fundamentals of good eating for anyone, is that you want to be like everyone's still, like, in my opinion anyway, and from all the research and microbiome reports that I've seen in people, everyone needs some animal foods. And I know that from a, I guess, ethical perspective, I can understand vegan diets from an ethical perspective, but I do believe that we can sustainably grow and harvest, sustainable farming practices to eat animals. But I think the problem is that there isn't that set up so much in society, and that probably people eat too much meat rather than just the right amount for them, and Dr. Stephen Lin promotes ancestral diets, because he likes to follow the Weston A. Price type dieting or nutrition, I suppose, where Weston A. Price visited all these tribal communities some decades ago. He's, I think, back, I can't remember how long ago. 1948 was when he died, but sort of early 1900s, I guess, he would have visited all of these communities of tribes and noticed that they didn't have tooth decay, they didn't have arthritis, they didn't have any of the Western problems that we have. And he also noticed that these people didn't have crowded teeth, they didn't have facial structure problems. And so Weston A. Price is a whole organization now that dedicates to ancestral dieting, basically an ancestral kind of eating, where you eat basically what Mark Hyman says, where you eat some plant-based, but you're still eating animal as well, because you need that B12 and you need creatine and you need all these different K2 vitamins as well that are really important for the proper development of bone structure and the jaw as well. So really interesting to delve into that. I find, to me, that is
what was the name of the website? Just quickly, I'm trying to write it down.
Weston A Price. So
Weston
so WESTON. So Weston A Price. So if you look at Weston. Yeah, if you look at Weston A Price, it's a whole other rabbit hole in a way. But I really agree with that kind of the book. If he wrote a book on it, I should get that book. I've been meaning to get that book. And in the book, he concludes that aspects of the modern Western diet, in particular, like having too much flour, sugar, and modern processed vegetable fats, has caused nutritional deficiencies that then cause dental issues and the chronic health problems we're seeing in our society today, and that we need to go back to ancestral ways of eating.
So Weston A. Price was a dentist, Canadian dentist, yes?
Yes.
Okay, got him. I'll definitely look into that. Oh, look, I believe that. And that's the way I try and eat. As you can probably see by my stories I put up occasionally, I really do try and eat that ancestral diet, and I don't overthink it. That's a big thing, because in the past I've thought too much. And really, I mean, if you could eat it 1,000 years ago, eat it. But when you go to the supermarket, you see these foods, like you can barely call it food. Like it's just packaged shit in a can. It's like, well, but yet the health stars have been going on about that lately, because that frustrates me, because they'll have something like, there's many, like for example, Diet Lemonade is 4 stars out of 5 on the health star system, right?
Oh, wow.
Well, there is no way Diet Lemonade is 4 stars out of 5. White bread loaf, I think it was Coles branded white bread, 4 stars, or maybe 4.5 stars out of 5. White bread, I'm like, that's not possible. Like, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who are just, maybe no fault of their own, that is uneducated in nutrition, and they believe that. And they go, okay, well, 4 stars out of 5, that's good for me. I mean, 2-minute noodles is like 3 stars out of 5. Like, there's nothing at all beneficial in a packet of 2-minute noodles.
No, there's not. And in
3
fact,
stars.
in fact, the condiments that come with it are even worse than the noodles themselves.
They're flavored salt. Let's be honest, it's flavored salt.
Yeah, and it's the wrong kind of salt, and it's the wrong kind of, flavors, which are mostly MSG based, and they do cause problems in brain chemistry, like massive problems. Like I was doing a short course through Endeavour College, looking at artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, and we do know that artificial sweeteners alter the gut microbiome, and it can cause glucose intolerance, and cause people to have higher than normal sugar levels. So they're not a substitute. They really aren't. They're more harmful than just having the sugar. So
yeah, but do they cause weight gain like sugar does?
Yes, some research has indicated that. They've done some research in mice where they put the microbes from obese humans into a mouse, and then the mouse gained a lot of weight. So there's implications of a disrupted microbiome as a result of artificial sweeteners that then cause weight gain.
There you go. Because a lot of people choose the no sugar options. A lot of people that are overweight will think that, they're doing themselves a favor by getting Diet Coke or, Diet Lemonade instead of the full sugar one. And there's a lot more to nutrition, and they sort of simplify it. It's too simplified, where they think, okay, eat this, gain weight, bad. Eat this, lose weight, good.
Yep.
And there's so much more to it.
Because the problem is they're thinking too much that, again, a lot of people still think calories in equals calories out. And if you have artificial sweeteners, then they don't have calories, and therefore you're not adding extra calories. So therefore you should be able to lose weight. And it's completely wrong thinking, because in my mind, if you want to have a stable weight and not worry about your weight so much, you have to focus on good gut health. You have to focus on a good microbiome diversity, good microbiome function. You want the right bacteria to be present. You want to be making butyrate, propionate, which helps balance blood glucose. It helps control inflammation. It makes energy. You want that to be functioning well, and you want your gut lining to be in a really good place, so that you have that mucus lining that protects you against leaky gut. I think that people don't realize just how powerful it is to do microbiome testing, because all of that's looked at. So if you want to optimize your diet for you, in my mind, you would do a microbiome test first. And yeah, and because I often do that for people, because people come to see me because they want to do a microbiome test and get educated in what their gut is doing and why they've got some problems. So my role is to do the testing and explain everything in detail and then summarize it all for them with some diet recommendations. So what I often do is say, when they've done that test as a minimum, and sometimes I'll do the nutrigenomic DNA test as well, all of those findings, I can really write up a proper diet plan for someone, because that's 100% based on what they need right now. And
it's a powerful tool, isn't it? It really is.
It's so powerful. So I've done a few now for people where they've said to me, look, Lucia, I am too overwhelmed from all the DNA and microbiome stuff, even though I've explained it obviously and I've summarized it in an easy to digest format. It's still overwhelming because it's the first time they've seen this stuff. So I can understand it's the first time they've come across this and this level of detail in their health. So then they'll say, okay, can you just tell me what to eat? So then I'll go, no worries, and they'll purchase whatever level of nutrition plan they want from me, and then I'll actually sit down and I'll go through their reports again, and I'll pick out the foods that best suit their healing and best suit their genetic expression and their microbiome, and then I'll do a 7-day basic meal plan for them. And I think that's really helpful.
It's
because
very
then
helpful.
they're eating according to what suits the findings of their reports, and also suits their lifestyle, and also suits I guess calories as well. Like, I mean, you do have to count, I do have to work out the calories to do the right macros, but it's suitable for them, you know?
Well, I spoke to Jackson Tippett a few weeks ago.
Oh, cool. Yep.
Yeah, and he you did his, is that correct?
I did his DNA test. So I went onto his podcast and I said, let's do your DNA test so that you experience it all, and then we'll do the podcast.
Yeah, because he spoke very highly about it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, he spoke really highly about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, I've been meaning to do it now since I first spoke to you. It's just, I need to do it. But it's a very powerful tool. And as I said, look, we're all different. And that's why I find it, when doctors give advice to people, it's just generic advice. Like, it's just, don't have sugar, don't watch. And like, well, that's a big misconception, is that all calories are equal. They're not. And, some people, I think it was my mother, she told me that her doctor told her not to eat fruit after 4 p.m. Otherwise she'll gain weight. I'm like, what? But that's the type of information that doctors are giving out. That don't have, they're full of sugar. Don't have grapes and apples. They're full of sugar after 4 p.m. or you put weight on. I'm like, so you mean to tell me if that's all you ate, if you had a good diet and you had a few grapes after 4 p.m., you'd gain weight? No, you wouldn't. That's bullshit. No way.
That's not true. Yeah,
but they don't know. That's the problem. A lot of doctors and people go to doctors for nutrition advice, and the wrong people to be asking.
It's a shame, I think, because the problem is that most people can't afford to pay for a microbiome test because it's not that cheap. And then for me to go through it with them, it's an hour consult, plus I'll spend another half an hour going through their report again after to do a good summary for them via email that they can actually follow and understand, so that they're not feeling like, because it's overwhelming talking to someone in a 1 hour consult and you go through all this stuff and they walk away going, so what just happened? So
especially if they don't have a basic understanding. Like I think if you were to speak to me about it, or even someone who's relatively has at least a basic understanding of what you're talking about, you could probably go through it in the hour. But to someone who has no idea about anything, I speak to people sometimes and they don't even know what microbiome is. So
exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
You need more than an hour.
You do. I mean, I if I could, I would spend 2 hours, but then it's a long time, right? And I would have to charge more, which I don't want to do. So I try and make things reasonable. So what I do is I go through the report again and I summarize everything we talked about in our consult, and then key findings and recommendations for what they can implement and should implement now. And if they need to see a naturopath for, some people have pretty severe problems that need a very, very detailed protocol with some very key supplements that need right dosages, and they're pretty hardcore, I will refer them out to naturopaths that I work with. And then I'll forward through all my findings to them, because some people have very severe problems in their gut and they don't even realize, because they think that all the years of gut pain or diarrhea, chronic constipation, or a lot of bloating and gas is just their way of life, when it's actually quite bad, So that's the kind of thing that I help with.
What's the right amount of, like, what's a normal amount of times to shit each day?
1 to 2 times a day.
1 to 2 times a day, yeah. Because some people,
yes,
many people ask, I go to the toilet once every 2 or 3 days. I'm like, man, that's not normal.
No, it's not. If people Google the Bristol Stool chart, it's called the Bristol Stool chart. That shows you, it's got like I think 6 levels from memory of the types of stool, what it looks like, and it tells you what's considered constipation and what's normal. And in that, you'll see that even if you poop every day, but it's pellety, you're constipated. And so there's 7 types. So if it's small, hard lumps like nuts, you're constipated. If it's sausage shaped and lumpy, like it was, and it's all very large, like it was hard for it to come out, but it was, you're constipated. So you need to have like a type 3, type 4, where it's smooth and it's like a sausage shape, and it's properly formed. If you're doing a decent, fully formed banana-shaped poop every day, then that's good. So what it looks like and the color matters.
Okay,
so that's
I'm looking at that scale now.
Yeah.
You know what? I have been, that's a lie, I have been, but very rarely. Like, I'm talking about maybe once, probably in the last 10 years, I've been maybe constipated once or twice. Like, I'm never constipated ever.
That's really
one
good.
thing I've never really experienced. And I always go to the toilet. I'm very routine with it, but it's good because I know, some people shit randomly. I'm like, how do you even plan your day? Because I could never, I could never ever go to a public toilet. I couldn't sit on a public toilet, put it that way. No way. So it's good. I'm like, okay, I'll go to shit in the morning, then I'm free the rest of the day. Some people are like, oh, I don't know, it's just random. I'm like, man, I couldn't live.
So what's interesting and what naturopaths often do is do the corn test with people. So you'll eat corn and you have to check your stool and see when that corn passes out, so you know how long your transit time is. So everyone has a different transit time with their poop. And it's interesting because some people have long transit times, and so it may be that you kind of do poop at random times in the day. Like, so normal transit time is anywhere between 12 to 24 hours. So, but it can vary from 12 to 48 hours from ingestion through to excretion.
And the 48 hours are still considered normal?
For some people, but I would think 48 hours is a long time.
It seems to be a long time.
Because that means that it's taken 2 days for you to digest a meal. And in that time, you would have had other meals, right?
Yeah, of course.
So imagine all that.
It seems like quite a long time, and you'd be if that's 2 days, you'd be quite stuffed, wouldn't you? You'd imagine.
I would say you're probably looking more at thinking that you're constipated if that's the case. But I would say that 24 hours would be pretty ideal. That, if you ate a meal today, it would come out tomorrow. But even 12 hours is normal as well. So, and the type of food you eat affects that. So if you're having a lot of fiber, water, and you're exercising, you should have good transit times where you're passing your stool in a good 12 to 24 hour period. But if you're having, say, a lot of gluten, a lot of bread, baked goods, not much fruit fiber or vegetable fiber, then you probably would be constipated and your transit time would be longer than 24 hours because it's just not able to pass efficiently through the bowels.
Does it frustrate you that people are so weird? Like, it's a weird topic when you talk about shit. People get really weird about it. It's like, what? It's a shit. It's completely normal. In fact, it's probably the most normal. Just people are very
it's such a fundamental to our health. So one thing I've learned in all this intensive study I've done the last couple of months is that, first of all, if you're constipated, it means you're not moving your bile properly through your gut. So you're not excreting bile from the liver properly to pass things through and detox properly. And if you're not excreting the right amount of bile, it means you're most likely constipated. And if you're constipated, you're not detoxing. So it doesn't matter if you do any sort of detoxing protocols or whatever. If you're not pooping every day, you're most likely building up the toxins and you're not detoxing. And the first thing that anyone should be looking at before they even consider any sort of detoxing protocols or getting healthier, focus on pooping every day first.
Yes.
It's that simple.
I'll be if I missed a day and I didn't shit, I'll be thinking something's wrong. Like I'd be straight away onto it. Like I'd know something's up.
Yep.
Because it'll be so out of the
100%.
ordinary for me, right? Like always shit twice a day. Have done for years and years and years. Very rarely that doesn't happen. So it's very, as far as I'm concerned, it means everything's working okay. But
everything's working well. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting now though, because it hasn't changed, because I've really cut back on veggies. Now, I've never been a fan of veggies, but I always ate them because that's what we're told to do, right? From the time we're children, is to have your veggies, have your greens. And I've struggled, and it wasn't until I started eliminating certain things where I'm like, okay, well, my suspicion is true. That was the reason. So I've always suffered with a lot of bloating, especially at night after dinner, because dinner is obviously when you tend to have veggies. I mean, people rarely eat veggies during the day. As typically at night with dinner, people have veggies. And I've struggled. I have struggled a lot with bloating, and I've cut certain things out, like cabbage, even broccoli. I've cut broccoli out. I don't have a great deal of greens. I'm really focusing on fruit, and a lot of sort of exotic fruit like papaya and custard apples and things like that. Obviously bananas, apples, oranges, but I've really sort of increased my fruit intake, and I've like pretty much not completely eliminated veggies, but cut right down on them, and I feel fantastic. Like honestly, I feel great.
Yeah, it sounds like you were having, so those broccolis and cabbages, they're high sulfur vegetables, and some people just don't digest sulfur very well. And I would say that your bacteria in your gut, it was not breaking down sulfur very well, and that would result in a lot of that bloating. So a hydrogen sulfide diet is what usually people do to help mitigate too much sulfur. But having said that, Chris, sulfur is important because sulfur is what helps make glutathione. So you do want to have some, but if it's definitely triggering the bloating, then you want to look at that in more detail.
Well, I think it is. I think it is. Yeah. Well, I have. What's onion like? Obviously, onion's got a high sulfur content. That's very obvious. But does that change when you cook it compared to eating it raw?
Yeah, it does. So, yeah, look, raw onion can be really hard to digest. And for me personally, it produces a lot of hydrogen sulfide as well. So I'm careful with how much to do of that one as well.
Obviously in salads, yeah. Like I don't think people eat raw onion, but in salads, obviously you're not going to have cooked onion in salad. But
no, and sometimes it may not have any problems with cooked onion, but certainly raw is completely different breakdown. So yeah, do you have problems with eggs as well?
No, not eggs. I don't have a problem with eggs. I have eggs probably every second day. I have a few eggs in the morning. No, I don't have a problem with eggs. I do have a problem with chili. Anything hot, I never used to. This is only sort of a new thing within the last 2 to 3 years. I've always loved chili. Like when I was a kid, I used to eat chili like straight from the tree. I've loved hot food, but in the last few years, spicy hot food, but in the last few years, I get that bloating, and it happens pretty much immediately, like within 20 minutes, 30 minutes of eating.
Yeah, okay. So you definitely have a sulfur problem with sulfur in foods.
Yeah,
so
I think so.
Let's talk about that offline. I think you should probably, I mean, I wouldn't want you to cut out those foods forever, but you'd want to deal with that so you can slowly put them back in. Because sulfur and hydrogen sulfide breakdown in the gut can be a sign of Sibo. So it's something to consider and think about. A lot of people.
Sibo? I don't know what's Sibo.
So Sibo is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it's an overgrowth of bacteria in your small intestine. Your body naturally gets rid of too much bacteria in the small intestine, because it really shouldn't be there in very high amounts at all, because most of your bacteria live in your large bowel, not your small intestine. So many things can trigger having too much bacteria in the small intestine, and when you have too much and the wrong ones, they cause all that bloating and gas when you have sulfur in the diet. So I just tested myself for it because I suspect I have SIBO after having my second child. I had an emergency cesarean, and I suspect I've contracted some sort of pathogenic bug in the hospital that's caused me to have SIBO. That's my theory, because I've had gut issues ever since the second child was born. It was like, boom, gut issues. So I used to eat, like, if I had cabbage or broccoli, within 2 or 3 hours I'd be vomiting. Like, it was that bad for me. And it's slowly, I've worked on it really hard, so now I can have those foods again and I'm fine. But it took probably 18 months of intensive work on my gut.
When you say work on your gut, what are you referring to?
So I had to go on specific probiotics, specific prebiotics. I went on a low sulfur diet, so none of those cruciferous vegetables like cabbage and broccoli, so that I wouldn't be triggered. And then I had to go completely gluten-free, because gluten triggers me as well. And I did more fruit and vegetables that were low sulfur, and nothing processed. I had to go really clean. And for me, the cleaner I am with my diet, I have, like, basically no problems. But it's a moment all the processed foods come in, because you go to a party and you're like, oh, whatever, I'll just eat that. And and sugar, like, if I have too much cake or desserts, it's within a day or two, I'm back with those gut problems, like the abdominal pain and the bloating and the gas. So I know that I've triggered, I feel that I end up getting an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine, and it just triggers it, and it just becomes cyclic for me. And now I've done my IBS microbiome test just to rule out IBS, and I've done the Sibo test, which the Sibo test is actually a breath test. You have to take, like, a solution of fructose, like, which is just sugar, in water, and you do a breath test every half hour, and you take 7 samples. So you do it over, like, a 3-hour period, and it's testing for the bacterial species that are literally growing in that time, and to see what it is that you're reacting to. And some people can be diagnosed with, like, hydrogen sulfide SIBO, where specifically hydrogen sulfide's a problem. And then you got to go on a very specific, what's called a biphasic diet in some cases, or even FODMAPs. There's different kind of diets that you would do, and you would do very specific strains of bacteria, probiotics. So that's another thing. Probiotics is not a one size fits all. People think, I'm just going to go take that random probiotic, and not realizing that it's actually doing nothing, or it's a completely wrong strains for them. So probiotics are extremely powerful as a therapeutic when you have problems like SIBO or like gut problems, but you need to know exactly which strains to take.
Well, I've had them before. Like, when I do, look, I'm not, I just literally go down and just grab them. I don't really put much thought into it, which now that you've mentioned that, I will. But whenever I have, like, a stomach bug or something of that nature, I always make sure that I have a course of probiotics to just put some good bacteria back in my stomach, because I'm obviously, when you have a stomach bug, it's not good, obviously. So
no, that's right. Yeah, so
it does work, I think, because I do feel better, and or any issues that I might have, because every time I wouldn't say every time, I don't have them regularly, obviously, but when I do have stomach bugs, I do feel it sort of a few weeks after it. After the vomiting or diarrhea, I won't feel good for a few weeks afterwards, like something's just off.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, because you have that overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria, and then it takes a while for the good guys to come back again and fix everything up. Because really, your good bacterial strains should work together, because they do work as colonies in the gut to get rid of the problematic bacterial strains in there, and so you should resolve yourself. It should resolve by itself. But a good probiotic to take is called Saccharomyces boulardii, and or you just look, it's called SB as well for short. That's a really good one to take for gastros and stomach bugs, because that one really helps mop everything up.
SB, okay.
Yeah, that's been a lifesaver for me, because after I had my second child, I kept getting gastros because I had that dysbiosis going on in my gut. And it is a therapeutic probiotic as well. So a lot of naturopaths will put people just on that one for a while because it's very therapeutic. So it's a really good one just to have in your fridge or in the cupboard. Well, they don't have to be refrigerated necessarily, but it's a really good one just to have in your kitchen when you do get bugs, because it really helps mop things up.
I'll take note of that, and that's some good information. Now, let me ask you, in regards to carnivore diet, what's your thoughts on the carnivore diet? Because obviously there's different levels, right? Of you can go like to the extreme where all you eat is meat, and then you've got variations where you can add a bit of fruit in, add a bit of raw dairy, add a bit of honey and things like that in. What's your thoughts on the carnivore diet as a whole?
If you were to be really hardcore, because I've seen some accounts on Instagram that are, I think one that you mentioned I follow as well, where they're proper.
Is that the
carnivore.
bullshit? Is that the guy who's like, is this bullshit? Is that him?
Oh, I don't know if it's that guy.
Oh, the kale is bullshit. That guy. You never seen him? That's that.
No.
I'll tell you his name because honestly, he's very. I love his account. He really highlights a lot of things. He speaks about all sorts of things like radiation, and he was the one that sort of made me aware of the issues with AirPods. I didn't realize just how much EMF was transmitted through AirPods. Like, it's bad. So
yes, I know. I tend to go back and forth when it comes to EMFs. That sometimes I'm like, nah, I'm cutting everything out, and other times I'm like, I'm so sick of being scared of everything. You know, like I get it,
isn't it? It's tough.
Yeah.
So there you go. So it's his username on Instagram is Carnivore MD 2.0, and his name is Dr. Paul Saladino. So he's the one that I follow. He's the one that sort of gets things, walks in a supermarket, grabs certain items, and goes, "Guys, kale is bullshit," and explains why, all the problems associated with it, and it's very informative. And you know what? But again, you know, if you do a quick Google search, you'll find so much contradictory information. That's the problem.
Yes. Well,
so
look, I will always advocate a balanced diet, because if you're having just meat, so it's just meat. So you're having what, you know, and by carnivore, is it also fish or just?
He does have fish, but he again, he's particular. I'm the same with fish. I don't just have any fish. I'm very aware of, you know, certain fishes have, you know, higher heavy metal content than others. So but yeah. So
I think, you know, you definitely you need plant, but you need the plants. You need the plants and you need the fruit, because otherwise, what is going to feed your microbiome? It's not going to be it's not going to be meat. It's not going to be fish, because that gets digested and absorbed. It doesn't make it to the large bowel. It just doesn't. So you have to have, like, those bacterial strains, like butyrate producers and all that, they thrive on your legumes and your fruit and oats, for example, and all the varieties of vegetables. That's what they live off. So the problem is, if you're not feeding them, they will disappear. And sometimes you don't get them back. So I wouldn't advocate a carnivore diet. I mean, I think there's therapeutic diets, like, you know, ketogenic diet does help a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause when they're more ketogenic in some cases. And people can heal more on a ketogenic diet in some cases. But again, it depends what you're eating, because you have to make sure that you're not eating foods just because they're keto doesn't mean they're going to be good for you necessarily. If you're lactose intolerant, then you can't be having all the cottage cheese and, you know, milk or cheese and all that other stuff if you're, you know, on a ketogenic diet just because it's a fat, you know. So I have met people who healed immensely on a carnivore diet, but I wouldn't think that you should be doing that long term at all.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it something that I think you could probably definitely benefit from it for, as in like maybe a month or 3 months of eating that way. And look, there's no question about it. I mean, if you were to go carnivore, you'll definitely lose weight. Like, there's no ifs or buts, you will lose weight. But again, it's the question of long term. But then the same thing can be said about vegans and plant-based. I mean, when I look at the doctors like, for example, Paul Saladino or Sean Baker, especially Sean Baker, Dr. Sean Baker, who I'm still waiting. He was supposed to come on the show a while ago, but anyway, yeah, he's brilliant, and not only that, but his physique. Now, if you look at anyone who is around, he's in his 50s. This guy, like he's in his 50s, and he is a physical specimen. Like I mean, a physical specimen. Now, if you look at someone who's maybe of a similar age and primarily plant-based, and there's many of them, they look like shit. They do.
Yeah.
They look like shit. They all look unhealthy and just unwell.
Yes. Well, I did the mastermind I did with MTHFR Australia. I asked the question about what do you think about vegan vegetarian diets? Because my biggest concern, there's a couple of things here, because I did a lot of research the other day about how healthy being vegan or vegetarian is during pregnancy, and the American Nutrition Association says it's totally fine when it's carefully controlled. And then I went down the rabbit hole of studies to find, well, what was the outcomes of things like zinc and magnesium and B12 and
especially iron.
Creatine, iron, D3K2, all these different vitamins. And it basically said that in most cases it was problematic that these people had nutrient deficiencies to a big extent. So I feel that when I went down to all and really unravel these studies, that it didn't actually show that it was beneficial, and it kept cautioning against doing it without supervision and doing it without really good in-depth knowledge of what it is that you're actually eating and how much you're eating of it all. And I think I'm wondering if with carnivore and even vegan or vegetarian diets, is that are people seeing these health benefits because they're actually cutting out the processed crap? Is that, I'm wondering if it's because suddenly you're sticking to this diet, that if you're going carnivore, you're gonna cut out all the fast food, you're gonna cut out all the soft drinks and the sugars and the alcohol. All of that's out, and all of those things are inflammatory, and you're getting a large amount of good fats. And if you're eating fish, you're getting good omega-3s, which is anti-inflammatory. You're getting your B12s, you're getting your creatine, you're getting all these high amounts of nutrients, which your body was probably starved of because you were filling most of your calories potentially with a lot of bread and processed grains and food like that.
Well, I feel like a lot of people do that. And that's something that I've been guilty of in the past as well. And, it's very easy just in the morning to get up, have a big bowl of cereal. And let's be honest, 95% of the cereal out there it's full of shit. There's nothing good about it. It's just sugar. And, or maybe even having, 4 slices of toast for breakfast, something like that. And, I've really cut that out. Now, even for breakfast, where I used to have maybe egg on toast, I don't have that. I'll also have bacon and eggs or something, but I don't have the bread. And since I've cut out bread, I've really cut out bread, which is probably the biggest thing that I've just wiped out completely. And I feel a lot better. And what I've noticed since I've cut out a lot of the bad carbs, like, the breads and all the other things, I find that I don't crash. So I don't get sort of that mid-afternoon fatigue. Or even that period of time after you eat it where you just feel like shit, you feel sluggish, which is obviously your body trying to process it all.
Yeah, it's your insulin spike that it causes. So it raises the insulin really quickly, and then it crashes really fast, and then you feel really tired. And I think that is probably why you're feeling a lot better, because your sugar levels are pretty stable all day now, rather than going up and down and spiking all the time.
The problem is the issue is carbs. I mean, where do you get your carbohydrates from mainly?
I eat a lot of sweet potatoes, carrots, pumpkin. I do eat rice, vegetables like your leafy greens and tomatoes, cucumbers, capsicums, onion. I do eat corn as well sometimes. That's where I get most of my carbs from.
So most of those foods you'd eat later on in the day, wouldn't you? I mean, you wouldn't really have sweet potato or potato for breakfast, would you?
Not for breakfast, but I will have that for lunch and dinner.
Yeah, okay. So a lot of people wouldn't have that for. That's what I mean. Because if you get those carbs in, a lot of people don't have that for lunch or for breakfast, so they wouldn't be getting those carbohydrates in till the night or to the evening.
Yeah, but and it depends where you normally eat and what you're choosing. I mean, a lot of us do eat out at lunch because we're working, but I'm very picky about which cafes I eat from and what their menu is. So I have my go-tos that I like to refer to, and sometimes I don't actually have even lunch. I'll have a late breakfast. I'll eat around 10 or 11, and then I'll do I'll do eggs and avocado, and I'll do gluten-free bread in that meal, because I really struggle with gluten. I can't handle it much at all, so I do eat gluten-free as much as I can.
Gluten is a big problem. Gluten is I think a lot of people that are intolerant to gluten, but they still eat it. There's a lot of people out there who are intolerant, but they just continue to eat it because maybe they don't realize that they're intolerant to gluten.
Well, I think people seem to think that if they're not celiac, then therefore gluten isn't the problem. But that's not true. You can definitely have non-celiac gluten intolerance. That's definitely a thing. That's real. And you can have a lot of inflammation as a result of gluten, because a lot of people these days have a problem with histamine. They just tend to have a lot of high histamine floating around, and that gives you the gut issues and the chronic sinus and migraines and anxiety and postnasal drip, and skin issues and itchiness. So that comes from histamine, and gluten is high, bread is high histamine. So that's probably what they're reacting to as well. And they're not realizing just because they think that because they're not celiac, then therefore it's not an issue. But I know that I'm not celiac, but I'm definitely gluten intolerant. So it's worth exploring.
It's definitely worth exploring. It's the most important part. Like, people neglect it, and it's like, it's so important for everything. Like, it's the way you feel. It's, it can be the difference of people. Sometimes people are depressed due to their bad diets. Like, it causes so many issues, especially not just physical, but mental. And it's like, you need to focus, like, stop watching fucking TikTok videos, stop wasting your time, and start, seriously, like, start focusing on, it's trial and error. I mean, add some things to your diet, eliminate some things, just see how you feel. I mean, it's a lifelong journey.
It is. It definitely is
a answer.
No, there's not. And I think that people have to realize that healing your body and getting that diet right does take time, and it does take effort, and it does take changing your habits. And that's hard because people don't want to change their breakfast because that gives them a lot of comfort. They like it. They don't want to, it's hard. It's hard to change habits. So it took me a while to get rid of gluten, but it was so obvious when I did put it back in that that's what I was reacting to. So it's a no-brainer once you really feel good, like you have, Chris. Now it's just no going back.
Oh, you don't, because you don't want to feel like that. Once you get out of that, and sometimes people, you think it's normal. Like, you think feeling a certain way is normal. It's normal to have aches and pains. It's normal to, have heartburn. It's normal to have bloating. And once you realize, hold on a second, no, it's not normal, and I actually feel fantastic, there is no way you'll go back. But it's incredible. And listen, I'm aware that you have to go, so I'll let you go now and get to your other meeting. But I appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure. We'll definitely do this again.
Yeah, we could talk all day, Chris, but thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate your time. And I by the way, I follow all the accounts that you've had to create over the last year.
It's a nightmare.
So it's a shame because you had such a good following in the first account. I think you were heading towards that 100K mark, and I think the censorship and all that has caused for you to have to create multiple accounts, and not everyone sees that, and so it's hard to move your audience, shift them over.
Look, it is hard, but I always look at it like, what, the ones that have followed me over there are the followers I want. I mean, if people don't follow you and you're not interested, that's fine. I mean, that's okay, but I'd rather 25,000 of engaged followers than 70,000 and half of them aren't engaged. So it is a shame that 100%. You have to do these things, but it is what it is. Anyway, Lucia, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, and talk soon.